Okay, welcome everybody. I would like to call to order the County of Ulysses Comp Plan Steering Committee meeting for May 7th, 2025. The first order is a roll call.
Carl Blankowski, Planning Board.
Neil Stevenson, Town Planner.
Roxanne Marino, Conservation and Sustainability Advisory Council.
Cecilia's committee member.
Liz Weatherby, committee member and town board member.
I am Ann DePetta and I am a committee member and a co-chair. With Liz and Allison. Is that our Allison?
Yep, Allison Weaver, Planning Steering Committee meeting. Planning Steering Committee.
And I don't know if it's been announced, Neil's institution, we have a couple of rearrangements and new folks who are here today, but
No,
have we said that?
I don't think the town board said that at all, but we have
We've
two
approved
new,
it, but
we
I
have
don't
two new members, Kim Moore, and Karen Metter, both BZA members. Kim is on the conference, so she won't be here, but Karen said she would be attending today.
So Kim is being shifted to the business role. Allison is now the village business because she owns a business in the village. And then Karen was just living out large.
I mean, she's another Lakeshore resident.
Lakeshore.
Not here.
Okay.
You-
So just for, we can do introductions when they come.
Awesome.
They're busy, yeah. So now we have two members from BZA and two members from planning board.
Yeah, Mo was sick today, so that's why he's not here.
Okay. And
Hello.
last but not least.
Sorry, hello, Diane Cohen, late. Party. Diane Cohen, party.
Thank you for being here.
For being here.
Your
It's okay.
commitment. It's okay. We're running to get here. Okay, is that everybody? So the next item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. So did everyone get a chance to look at the agenda and do we have any amendments or updates? Do I have to read the agenda?
Doesn't need.
I don't know if it's the next steps or you get to come up here.
Oh.
Line up, or the spot, on one side or the other.
I would, can we just, maybe it's an old business. I want to make sure we're getting, are we still keeping our time, like our time to get to DEC? So maybe it's, if we have an update, because I've kind of not done that,
Yeah.
we have to go back,
It will be taking
then
work.
we gotta
yeah.
figure that out, so maybe.
The last direction, oh, if you want to add it to the agenda, yeah, let's do it at the end.
Maybe
Make sure
someone can make us a template of what our hours are, because they're probably all about this.
Well, and I don't know if we need to anymore, so I more wanna just make sure before we all get too far down the road. We have to backtrack, But I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with that one addition.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Do we want to introduce our
Yeah.
new member? I want you to go around, so we would love for you to introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Karen Metter. I have lived here permanently or full-time since January of 2016, but my husband and I bought our home with anticipation of moving here at some point in the future back in 2007, and we came here pretty regularly, about 4 or 5 times a year. I'm a physician, a pediatrician, although I now spend most of my time doing consulting and expert work, helping hospitals get paid for the care that they provide to patients.
Awesome, great, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
You know everybody else?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Right,
But that's
we'll do a
all.
quick go around, so we
Yeah.
all
Yeah, we can
know
go again.
who we are. All right, so you know Liz.
Liz
Okay.
Weatherby.
I'm Ann DePetta. I live in
Sorry.
the town down in Jacksonville. I'm a consultant, so my area of work and expertise is housing. I've been working in housing for 30 whatever years.
Great.
And I'm a co-chair.
Great.
Excuse me, are your mics on? It'd be helpful, if you either turn on your mics or speak a little
Yeah, we
louder.
have microphones right here.
But are they
These
on?
more for the.
Yeah.
Recording.
So that I could hear you.
Oh, okay.
We
So I
have
mean,
It's not like
microphones
speaker
for
for that purpose.
us.
We'll just have to speak up.
Yeah.
No, I mean, she was
Yeah.
facing someone else, and I wasn't getting all the information, so
Would you like me to repeat it?
please.
Okay, my name is Ann DePetta. I live in the hamlet of Jacksonville. I've been a resident here since 1998, I think. And the area that I work in is housing. So I'm just a member of this committee and my area of work is housing. So I've been working in that area for about 30 years and I'm a co-chair of this committee.
I'm Carl Pankowski, Chair of the Planning Board, and a newbie to the town. I got here in 2021, so. And I'm the Lake Shore rep on for the comp plan.
Hi, Caitlin Olson, Town Supervisor. Nice to see you, Mr. Houghton. Thank you for joining us.
We know each other, you know me.
Yes.
Roxanne Marino, I'm the chair of the town's Conservation Sustainability Advisory Council. I've lived in town since 1986. Served on lots of different committees and on the board and as the supervisor, scientist that deals mostly with water issues.
Hi there, I'm Diane Cohen. I'm live in the town of Ulysses, live in near Jacksonville on Perry City Road since 2001. And I'm the CEO of Finger Lakes Reuse.
Hi, my name's Ty Vasilius, live in our town of Ulysses in Willow Creek. Grew up here, family has been here forever. Agricultural land, family farmland, and my area of work is workforce development. Great.
Maybe I'll
I
just-
actually haven't met you guys.
Right. So, yeah, go ahead.
But I'm Liz Weatherby, I'm on the town board, and I'm the assistant chair, deputy chair for this board.
And I'll just share a couple of quick things I shared professionally, but I did grow up here. I'm a fifth generation farming family. My parents still live on the farm my great grandparents purchased. It's about 30 miles south of Ithaca, in a hamlet called Lockwood. But what's perhaps even more interesting is my maiden name is Salo, and there's a Salo Drive in Trumansburg, and that was my dad's uncle, my great uncle, who built all the houses on Salo Drive in the, I think, 1940s.
That's very cool.
That's a cool name.
Actually,
Great. Thank you,
and
everyone,
then
for doing that.
Allison is
Oh, yeah.
also on the post steering committee, she's just calling in remote.
Hi, Allison Weaver. I live in the town of Ulysses. I've lived here for 7 years. I also own a business. I own the funeral home in the village. I've worked there for 16 years and have owned the business for just over 12. So both reside and work here.
Okay, so we did our roll call, we approved the agenda. Our next item is to approve the past minutes. So wondering if everyone had an opportunity to look at our past minutes from the April 2nd meeting. Do we have any corrections to those minutes or?
No changes.
What? Okay, so if not, do I have a motion to approve those draft minutes? Thank you, Diana.
I'll second it.
Carl, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, our next item on the agenda is privilege of the floor. This portion of our community meeting is where members of the public can make general comments on items that are not related to items on our agenda this evening. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes in length. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board on items not on tonight's agenda?
Yes, Peter Houghton, 1333 Degatic Boulevard. I just some questions, not comments. You said there's 2 planning board members on the meeting?
Mo Klein
Carol
is the
one of
other
them.
one,
Who's the other one?
Morris Klein,
Okay, and then there are 2 zoning board of appeals people,
Correct.
who are they?
Karen,
Parent. And
Kim Moore,
Kim,
Kim Moore,
okay,
she's,
are there any council people? Well, I don't, the supervisor is, but
I'm
any
on the
others?
town board.
This is also.
You're on the town. All right, thanks.
Okay.
So
and-
how, besides the one that's remote, how many other members are there that are not remote or here tonight?
Kim, who else is missing? 2? Kim and Bo.
Mo Klein is one, and
Kim Moore.
Kim Moore.
yeah, Kim Moore, she and her husband own Moore's Marine there
I
on
know, yeah, okay,
Boyce Road.
okay. Thank you.
I guess that's it. Okay. All right, thank you for that. Our next item on the agenda is old business. So, I have to close privilege of the floor. Sorry, can I get a motion to close the privilege of the floor?
Make a motion
Thank you,
to
Pro.
close privilege.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, next item is to review the draft vision. I think this is. You ready?
And there, so we circulated, we last meeting worked on the vision statements and revising it. So we took everyone's comments and we made some final revisions. We just wanted to double check if anybody had any further comments on the vision statement that was provided.
So the third one is the one that we're going with, the one we're really
Yeah,
looking
so
for
it was a
changes.
combination, we talked it was gonna be a combination, there were some components from the one that was previous and the one number 3, which I think was everyone's favorite, we kind of just did a combination of the 2.
Any questions, comments, things to say about the reworked statement?
I just had a comment, but I still think a shorter one is nice. That's just maybe a slight thing, and that we could use some of these really good sentences as the, the that fit into the introduction of the pertinent sections and just have it be slightly more, overarching and concise. As a vision statement, but I know that there are vision statements that are very long also.
Right,
So-
it's a vision paragraph.
Right, the vision paragraph, which is what this is, but like a lot of these are really sort of the target things that we're developing in a particular section, so.
And I know that's
Left
something.
to my own, I would do it that way, but.
And I know
just
that's
my
something
suggestion.
we've kind of discussed over time and, we had it available to the public at the open house and we actually really didn't have any comments regarding length. It was more so content. Also, I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold, but, so, I think a concern that we had before is, it's long, but we also don't know what we would necessarily want to take away. So I think that's why we kind of kept it the length that it was, but understandable.
Yeah, you can condense the ideas.
Would it be more useful if we changed it from statement to something else, like just the vision or the community vision or the, rather than saying statement?
You certainly could. I think that's up to you guys, how you would like it represented.
Yeah, I think. I like the rework. I like the rework a lot. I like the terms that were used. And kind of the melding between the first and the second, original visions. I guess I go back and forth on the length too, but I could see longer, but I've also maybe just, this is our vision. Like, kind of kick out that stigma of needing a short 2-sentence thing, because I don't want to kick any of that. I think all of these are important. Sure. And this is such a diverse community in terms of what people need and want. Looking at the survey, everything, one of these things were addressed in the survey, of what people want, so I don't want to delete things necessarily. Sure.
I don't know how constructive this is, but, and I'm not an expert in any of this, but this feels more like a set of values, like I like everything that's in here too, but. Like the vision doesn't seem like there's a. Like, I think I agree that something more concise, but it's so hard to get to that when. We have so many things to do, so I would say that, well, I don't really feel like this is a vision statement, because it's not really saying. What we want to be in the future, I think the values that it expresses are excellent, so I'm happy with that.
That's a great point. Vision and values.
Well. I'll just read something that's shorter. I'm not saying we should do this, but it's the idea of encompassing them and doing more of visions, and then the values are later. The town of Ulysses is a welcoming rural community in the Finger Lakes region. We proactively promote sustainable practices that safeguard our natural resources, agricultural lands. Or maybe we can just get rid of sustainable practices because it's later. Agricultural lands and lakeshore. We prioritize community well-being and are committed to inclusive and sustainable repeats too many times. Sustainable development that balances growth with protecting the natural environment and our cherished small town character. We support initiatives that provide diverse housing options, uplift local businesses, connect the community, and enhance job opportunities. We recognize the importance of climate change preparedness and community resilience through sustainable and regenerative practices. So, like, those are all the things that we articulate later in our values, but it's short. So that's, I just wanted to make it as an example.
I know,
The
it still
idea.
feels long to me. I feel like. Right, if we're gonna go with a
It's
vision
half the
statement,
length.
right, you do like a sentence on it, and then we have the values that are more extensive. The only thing that stood out to me, and I don't, maybe we talked about this, maybe it's not a big deal, but just using the phrase climate change, like is that like a good thing or not a good thing?
I think it's a little bit divisive.
Yeah,
But
So, I
there's
mean, this is-
other ways, I think it is actually stated in different ways in the same statement, talking about sustainable, talking about, protecting our natural resources.
yeah, disaster preparedness and.
Yeah, things like that.
These things, but I'm just throwing it out there. I don't, and we,
It's. Yeah, I'm glad it's in there.
It's
Yeah.
kind of the challenge of our times, and it's also part of what we got the grant to make an update of the comp plan for.
yeah,
Recognizing that I don't see this a bad thing.
I think a community's plan is so different from a vision statement for an organization that has a particular, very focused vision. And I think what came when I was reviewing all the survey data, there are a lot of needs that are unaddressed in our community.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of what could be some very conflicting values, right, and priorities. And so I think it would be inaccurate to be able to condense our broad, diversely needed to be served community into a single like point.
Mhm.
And I think it'd be lovely if we could, but I don't think we're there. And I also don't want to take numerous meetings to get there, to be really
Right.
genuinely honest.
Yeah.
I think the third iteration, or if this is the third, but I think it's really done a good job. I think it's a real reflection of what the community demonstrated they want. And my vote would be just to be like, is it a perfect vision statement? No, but nothing is. But I think it's a very serviceable
Mhm.
one. And let's move on to the next thing we have to do.
Yeah, it's all accurate. Okay.
I like what Roxanne just read. I felt like it put you more into that kind of future space that we're gonna be. So I don't know what the difference is in the language, and I'm not volunteering to be the one to parse that. And I'm in general agreement that it's overarchingly, collects the things, but if there is time and space for us to continue to like condense it a little bit, maybe Roxanne, you could share that now or something, just so it's in the record, as opposed to just reading it.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know when you have to have this like set in stone.
There's not necessarily a time frame, but to Caitlin's point, we also don't wanna be with a horse and, take months and months and months to
Yeah,
develop it.
sure.
So maybe, and maybe we did this before when we were trying to decide on a name as well, is maybe we take the 2 vision statements, so the 3rd iteration that we have currently, and maybe we take Roxanne's, and we could just have a final vote. Is that something maybe you're open to?
Allison has a.
Yeah,
maybe
go ahead,
before you
Allison.
go,
Go
Allison.
Allison, I'm sorry.
Cause you
No,
can't see.
that-
I
that's-
behind you.
And I mean, I do agree. I think it's lengthy, but I was kind of looking around. I know we've looked at a lot of other comprehensive plans months ago. I think every town's comprehensive plan statement and vision is this long, is from what I found. So I don't think this is something out of the ordinary lengthwise, because I also thought it was long for a vision. But I don't think it's out of the realm of being too long, just looking at some other plans also. That's my only thought.
It'd be hard to remove anything too, but.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
We do one more iteration, that pushes us to the June meeting to approve it. Then it goes to the town board after that. Is that how that works?
Does it get approved separately from the whole plan?
It just
Or it
goes,
just gets
us
included
and
in
it goes into the plan. Okay,
That's really up to, I mean, if you wanna, formally discuss it with the town board, that's up to you, but it's not required.
okay,
I was
Oh.
just consolidating it with other things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess I'll leave it up to you, if you're happy with, the statement that you have and you wanna go with it. And, that's the one you wanna go with, that's fine, but if you, wanna have a more condensed version, maybe to go against, not go against, but to compare it to. And maybe decide on that, it's up to you guys.
All right, well, where do we go from here today? Do we need to vote on whether we want to keep talking about this, or if we want to just accept what it is? Or how do you,
I think maybe if you wanna go around, you could just maybe vote. What do you
what do you think, Niels? Do you have input here?
I mean, given what Angelina said, like, yeah, I mean, go around, see if you guys want to decide now, or if you want to have Roxanne send hers out and consider like a additional.
so you can sit down and put them side by side, and decide if that's what you want.
Yeah, I think we
First.
should. Maybe table this and put this one on June.
Well, there's a couple other people who aren't here too. So
Yeah, that's
we
true.
just come to just terms with, do we want it
Okay,
long and inclusive and
At high
value
level,
or
yeah.
short and,
yeah,
and does it encompass it? And then you can just decide.
okay, so for the next meeting, we'll decide and you'll circulate a second option. And then we'll put those 2 pieces side by side. And Allison, I'm just making sure your hand is not up again. It's just still up.
It's waving.
Sorry, did not mean to have it up. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries, just noticed it there. So you don't mind circulating that to us?
No, I
Okay,
can
so
do
then next meeting, we'll put that one to bed. Okay, great. Any other discussion on the vision statement? Okay, next order of business is the results of this survey.
Yeah, so I had prepared a memo for the survey results, so we had 385 total surveys that were taken. So the results that you have, they were an appendix basically to the memo, have all of the pie charts, and they also have all of the short answers that were provided. So some of the main themes from the survey, respondents praised that they really appreciate the scenic beauty and natural resources that Ulysses have and the efforts of civic groups that work to protect them. They also expressed their appreciation for farmland, agriculture, community gathering spaces, education opportunities, food and grocery access, parks. And the Black Diamond Trail were also identified as important things to respondents.
Sorry, Angela, could you tell us where you are, what page you're on?
Oh, on the memo, I'm sorry, I'm on page 3, so just going over
Thank you.
some of the major themes. And then also, you'll see on pages 2 and 3, there's also just a summary of the demographic data of where respondents live, how long they've lived there, if they go to school or work in Ulysses, the age of the respondents and their current housing situation. So just about half reported that they live, about 45.7% reported that they live in the town of Ulysses outside of the village of Trumansburg. And then going to major themes on page 4, future development was brought up. Respondents expressed they would like to see more residential and non-residential development, but without compromising the small town atmosphere and rural character that Ulysses currently has, or negatively impacting the environment. Affordability of housing was also brought up. That's something that folks expressed that they were unsatisfied with. They'd like to see a diversity of housing options and would like to see it affordable. I know senior housing was brought up numerous times. Some respondents expressed that it's hard for their families to stay, that they have aging family members or they have young families and they really want to stay in the village, but maybe they're not able to do so. So some folks took the time to express what some of those challenges were, just so we could better understand why they selected the choices that they chose. And then in question 10, over the next 15 years, we asked what type of residential development the town of Ulysses should focus on. So single detached dwelling was a popular answer, as well as senior housing. We also had co-ops and cluster housing and townhouses and condominiums. Those were among the top answers, and small scale multi-dwelling. Respondents also indicated that they would like to see more local shops and restaurants throughout Ulysses. They indicated they would also like to see commercial development in and around the village of Trumansburg, in and around the hamlet of Jacksonville and along Trumansburg Road the most. So that's where question 9 has that captured. Infrastructure improvements were brought up. There's an interest in expanding public water service, but some people expressed they didn't quite understand if it would necessarily be a benefit to them or how expensive it could be. 75% of the respondents indicated that they were satisfied with the quality of their water. Those that were unsatisfied indicated that was due to either smell, taste, or the hardness. If you look at the results, they're pretty thorough, exactly what was going on there. 63.4% indicated that they were unsure if the town should establish a sewer district. A lot of it is just kind of that uncertainty of, what is the benefit? Some people have septic, some people are having issues with it, some people think theirs works just fine. So it's really trying to understand, what is the overall benefit of it and the expense of it. But in general, there is a curiosity that people would like to learn more about it, the opportunity of expanding, having a sewer district. And then you'll see under it on page 5, the pie charts that summarize the results of those questions. And then I know this has been a major topic, obviously recreation and community well-being were some major themes that were talked about. So recreation community spaces, people are looking for more third spaces. A lot of people depend on schoolyards and things like that, playgrounds to have a recreational space, but they're a little bit limited because obviously during the school day, they're limited because it's in use during the school day by the school and students. So it's just having, additional spaces. A dog park was brought up quite a bit. Something where a place where all ages can get together. Also entertainment spaces was something that was brought up as something that might be beneficial for the village, or excuse me, for the town. A recreation center was brought up. We had multiple ideas that were brought up. So a recreation center, parks, playgrounds, sports fields, a dog park, as I said, general community spaces were brought up as something that they would like to see in the future. And I know she's not here, but Kim provided her comments to the survey responses, and something I think was important that she said is she's like, a lot of people are very much focused on parks and recreation, but we also don't want to get lost that that's the only thing that we're focused on, that there's other elements that are also important about economic development, historic preservation, natural resources, things of that nature. So, you know, not to get too lost. I know it's kind of timely that everyone's talking about, you know, parks and land donations and things like that, that, you know, we don't want to lose sight of like the other purposes of the comprehensive plan. So I thought that was a really important takeaway there, but I did want to express that that was brought up quite a bit in the survey. And I know the comments are quite lengthy, was I think 67 pages, so it is a lot to read through. So I hope this memo gives a good overview of, in general, what are folks thinking, what's on their minds, what's important to them. Are there any questions? Or any thoughts if people didn't have time to read through the results?
Yeah, one thing, two things I had actually, but I don't know. You know, if you can do this or how hard it would be, but it's interesting that like for this survey, I mean, just in terms of using this for developing the chapters and everything. I think it's good to know what people outside the town. Outside the village, who is what this plan covers in terms of our town's guidance documenting policies and things like that. It's only like half of all of the respondents were people who live in the town outside the village. And so if there was a way, and so some of these answers could be very much, you know, influenced by that, the vision, that view, as opposed to the way the issues of the town outside the village. And so if there was a way to just, you know, break out this, if it's not hard, at least for some of the key things, you know, to just do a similar sort of analysis to what you did, but for the town outside the village.
I agree.
Also, because I just think that would be a helpful thing for us to have, and I'm not in any way diminishing the value of broader perspectives and village perspective. It's all, you know, quite incorporated people who would come into the town, but in terms of some of these things, you know, say water development, land use, those kind of things are only things that our town, those people would pay for.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I just think that would be
just
helpful.
make sure that you include Jacksonville, Hamlet, Waterford,
Right.
and Lake Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if those were
I was gonna say, everybody but the village and then people
Oh,
else.
yeah.
But see, I'd be real careful because village residents pay the same tax as town residents do, except for water, fire and EMS.
Yeah.
And so every person who says parks in here who lives in the village, if with the town gets a park, village residents will pay for it too, because that comes out of the A fund, which is paid for by every resident of the town, inclusive of the village. So it gets really tricky because I hear from village residents who are like, I'm writing a check every year to the town of Ulysses the same way everybody else is.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky, it's not just town residents pay this, so therefore we need to, so we do need to be mindful of that component also, that it's not, I agree about water. I agree about sewer, those are things outside the town, and I agree with some degree about a lot of the land use things, but when it gets to parks and recreation, that's a town-wide.
And I think something, maybe this is kind of a middle ground, so Google, this was done through Google Forms, so obviously we have the pie charts, but it also exports it to essentially an Excel spreadsheet. So
Right.
there's a way to run a query that's like, okay, how many people that are just in the town or just in these hamlets answer these questions a particular way, so that way you can kind of see, you know, is someone at a disadvantage, or, you know, is there a certain area that's really, you know, stressed or needing something, you can kind of see it and do a query that way. So I can certainly share, I know Niels hasn't, but maybe we can share that with the group, that way, you know, people can see all of the data, and if they want to run their own queries, you're able to do so.
And I don't think it doesn't sound to me like what Roxanne is suggesting is that we don't consider at all what the village perspective is, but it would be interesting to me too, to lay those two things
For
side
sure.
by side. And see like, what is the difference? Is there a difference? Just out of curiosity.
Well,
for
and
data.
because some things that will be recommendations or applied to in the comprehensive plan are things that land use things that the town, that this guidance document is done by residents outside of the village. I wasn't really even trying to parcel it out into who pays for what. So, I mean, town residents pay for other things outside the village, not with taxes, but with sales tax money that comes in that could go back and lower their county tax, so they do pay for the other planning.
If it's an
services.
easy
It's
thing to look
complicated.
at, it might be an interesting
Yeah.
thing to.
It's just a matter of creating a link and I can share it with you all. And then, like I said, you'll see all of the answers. You'll just see like the timestamp of, when people completed it and things of that nature. And then, like I said, you can kind of run your own queries and search that way. So I think that would be helpful. So.
Great, thank you.
I think it's really important to reference that there already have been very substantial resources spent just a few years ago to explore the public water issue along Taconic Boulevard. And it was very conclusively documented that it would be much more expensive, that most of the residents were happy with their well water and did not want the disruption to public water along there, particularly since development is so restricted anyway. So I don't think we need to rehash the question of public water, at least for the Lakeshore District. Extensive resources were already spent exploring that, and it's been appropriately rejected. So I think that should at least be acknowledged and not repeated.
Thank you for that.
What year was that? It wasn't in my time, that's why I wondered.
Oh, very recently. 5 to 10 years.
Must be closer to 10.
Is that data somewhere available or that we can access
I'll
it?
have to find
It
out.
must be. We
I'm a
participated
Lakeshore
in
person,
public
that's why I'm
hearings, and
interested.
There were surveys, there was,
A town of Ulysses?
yes.
It might have been when Water District 5, I think it's called, was being considered, because originally it was one thing, and then there was a new plan to try to add in along the lakeshore to it. I don't remember how long ago
It's
that
two
was. but
thousand 15, and
Yeah,
I totally disagree, Karen, with your
I think
conclusion.
so.
That was back when 20, that
The
was,
town did
Well,
not
it's not
spend any,
entirely my conclusion.
the
It,
town did not spend resources, they cut it short. The town board made the comments in public that the Lakeshore people are wealthy people, they can afford their own water systems, we don't have to go any further.
no, there was a lot more to that. There was a huge
It was
plan
2000, it was 10 years ago.
with showing that it wasn't feasible, that the terrain is not conducive to it, and the majority, it was a very small group of people who lobbied to try to get other people to pay for their water that they were not investing in. And there was a very strong showing. I participated in the public hearings and we said, we don't want this.
All right, so we're gonna table this conversation, because one of the things, we wanna have the conversation, we wanna hear from everyone. We do, but I apologize for not really knowing how it's supposed to work in a public meeting, going back and forth. So
Sorry.
that's on me.
What?
So, no, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean at all. I just need to I need to understand the protocol so that I'm doing the right thing as the chair. So I will accept input from those that know what our next steps might be in this dialogue. So that we can make sure we get to a conclusion that makes people
Dialogue
about this topic. that we're
In
on.
this particular case, we might wanna just try to find some of the information.
Okay.
See what that report might be, and then we can definitely have some further conversations as we dive into utilities.
right, I was
Probably
gonna
be the
say,
best place
one of
maybe, or
the
that-
chapters.
So there's a link, if there's a link to this report, maybe just so we can all see it. And then we can bring it up, in future elements. I think it would make sense to have this, continue to have.
Yeah, it's
This
a conversation, yeah.
Especially because in the survey, the majority of people who don't have water wanted, I mean, it's 32 to whatever. 27%, but 32% of people said yes, they would prefer to have public water.
But then when
Survey.
you look at how much they want to pay for it, it's whether they can really achieve
Right.
that. But I was just gonna also say that we did another survey that asked some of these similar questions and more about people's water problems within the last year. So
Right.
So there's some work.
that can be, sort of combined with this when we get to that section. And so, yeah, and that was only people outside that we would have jurisdiction over making a water district, so the village, the town outside the village.
So we're gonna talk about these topics specifically.
Right.
This is a topic, so we'll make sure we're looking at that. We'll make sure we're looking at some of the public opinion on this also, obviously, and Roxanne, we'll look at your input there as well.
And I think, you know, that certainly doesn't have to be a discussion today, but maybe we can talk about, I know we've looked at previous plans that, you know, relate to this comprehensive plan update, you know, if there's other reports you think that we need to be thinking about, like I know there was that survey. Or there's this other report, if there's other things that maybe we think we want to include or have it as an appendix, you know, maybe that's something we can start thinking about now and decide as we go along when we're reviewing these elements.
I think I sent you the summary, the water study.
You did, yes, you
Yeah,
did.
And so I don't.
Just how we formally, you know,
Right,
wanted
you
to
can
have
put
it in the
on
plan,
the
and, you know, and
SharePoint,
we feel
people can access that.
you know, obviously we can have, you know, results as an appendix, but if we think it's worth to have a narrative, you know, we can decide that as a
Well,
group.
just to release.
Sorry to go.
All right, no, let's all stay on the same. Let's all stay on the same topic if we can. Any other, comments? What are we talking? Community survey.
Survey.
Like, so, okay, so the age category breakdown, do we know if that's kind of representative, like what is actually in the broader, like, town, like, does that match? Like, there's about 34%
demographics.
of the 41 to 51 year olds, or
Yeah.
do we know that, or?
Oh, I can measure it against it, sure.
I would also be curious about our rent versus own. Because I noticed that almost 94% of the respondents were homeowners, and maybe that is what the town looks like. But if it doesn't, then I would say we might need to do a little extra work. When we're doing our review or having our next open house to maybe reach renters within town.
It's definitely.
I have
happened
a
that.
feeling it's, yeah.
No, it's in the housing report is how much, what percentage I think of renters there are. It's in the housing report, I think it's closer to the 20% range.
Yeah, so I mean, that would mean that seemed like a really
We've
skewed number, yeah. So
we do have the lowest rental rate though.
I believe
in
it.
the town, in the county.
I believe it, yeah, I
Even with
believe
the
it.
mobile home, is that across the county line?
Some of
No,
it is,
some
not
of
all
it
of it. Most of it's here.
It's also a different ownership structure, so then it's not considered real estate. Property versus real estate. But, yeah. Or other. Conversation. We'll go there. But yeah, so anyways, I guess that was my feeling, was to have, we could do a little, I don't know if we can do some targeted outreach to landlords or rental communities within the town. Okay, anything else on the survey results? Go ahead, Roxanne.
I mean, the one other thing that I feel like it's not really captured in the summary as a highlight, but it's a thing I brought before that I think we really need to understand as we're making this plan, which is the whole idea of agricultural land use, how people see that and value that, and it jumps out at you, and I see in Kim's notes, you know, that the largest response to what type of non-residential development people wanted by far was local agriculture.
Yeah.
And then there was a little bit of industrial agriculture, and of course, you know, there's issues there that people see. And it looks like if you try to just add those bars together, either very important or important. Agriculture as a land use, it wasn't really a land uses question, but when agricultural land use was in that question, it was like 90% of people said that was either important or very important, but then, you know, you read the other comments and people are concerned about, you know, pollution and what comes off of them and all, and then they want different kinds of development, and all those things just interact so tightly that I hope that as we go along through this process, we're gonna figure out how to really delve more deeply into that, maybe targeted meetings with agricultural landowners and active farmers, and maybe if they don't feel comfortable to come to a meeting and speak, that, you know, we could do short interviews with that. It can't be that many people in the town, just to find out, you know, what they see as challenges, trajectory forward, concerns, with ability to retain the farmland and get some more idea from the public on a clear understanding of what they like. Do they really want local agriculture and food? Do they want open space? Because it really connects to so many other recommendations and decisions. And I thought that when we had that little focus group, that was really great. Actually, the people who came were really, you know, who were in agriculture.
Yeah.
And landowners, but people were sharing ideas, and I thought it was really a great start towards kind of getting there.
Yeah.
So I just think that kind of comes out in the data, but not so strongly in the things that you
I
raised.
can update the
And
memo
maybe
if you
just
want. I mean,
put
I did
just-
say it was like
right.
important to people, like
Yeah,
overall,
yeah.
that was something that they
Yeah.
had appreciated.
No, it
Yeah,
is.
but I don't know if you can get that much more like why or
No,
what
you can't.
agriculture is important, because the number I saw was kind of. I see the value of like, they value protection of farmland, but what does that actually mean? Like, there's a comment here that says, I value farmland and agriculture, but not all agriculture is good. Large CFOs with their excess manure are probably from CAFOs. And I value open land as much or more than agriculture.
So like, that's
So
one
that's
comment.
not protection of agriculture,
Yeah.
that's protecting of open space, and there's a
Right.
couple other comments that go back and forth.
Sure.
No, I
So
wasn't
I was
suggesting
kind of
to change
surprised
it.
on
Yeah.
the high, yeah,
But I do
I don't know how to
appreciate
take
that
it
people
more.
did take the time to kind of express of like, you
Yeah.
know, when we say agriculture and open space, like, what are you thinking about? What does that
Yeah.
mean to you? So I did appreciate that, you know, respondents did take the time.
So if we could get further into that somehow as we go along, that's all I'm saying, is I don't think you should change your report much, because there's not that much in here. There's a lot of diverse comments, but in reading through them all and looking at those graphs, it really jumped out at me that, you know, this is something. It relates to everything else.
Yeah, and I think when
Where
we
we
get
have
to,
residential, the future land use map, everything.
yeah, and I think when we get to the agriculture and land use element, I feel like that's probably where we can
Right.
start to have a little bit more dialogue,
Right.
you know, with those folks.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on? Survey?
just some of these comments, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a lot.
There's a lot of
Yes,
comments.
there's a lot of comments.
It's really great that people took that much time.
Yes, no, I
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
Just inundated us with information, which is
And
fantastic.
we had a good turnout.
And
right?
there's a
Yeah,
lot
we
of
did.
topics
Had a-
covered.
So what would you consider the response rate? Like how many potential respondents were there? Or what percentage did respond?
I have to take a look at that, but I will say we went from like 35 to 385 within the matter of a few weeks, which I think was really impressive. And I know a lot of it was, you know, people sharing on Facebook. I know Kim, you know, shared quite a bit. We had flyers, we did a lot more marketing. I feel like that's what really helped us out.
Sent postcards to
We
every
did say so, yep.
address.
And we also had it available at the town hall. And we had
Yeah.
it available at the open house.
And from the housing chapter, we have roughly 5,000 residents in the town. So, you know, out of this set of surveys, we're probably at maybe
3,000
maybe
households,
1,000 or so,
maybe
so
it's a little
probably
over 10.
20% of the town respondents. Somewhere's in that vicinity.
Yeah, if you looked at households, it's probably between 10 and 20%.
Yeah, because there's about 2,500 households plus or minus a little bit,
Right.
so.
Yeah, okay.
So just a final question, so you're gonna send us, you're not gonna do anything more with this data, but you're gonna send us a link to the data.
Yeah, so the Excel spreadsheet
That you can
basically,
separate out.
yeah.
by-
and you can do the queries, yep, it's
By word.
Google Sheets, but it's the same thing as Excel, but. You'll have the flexibility that you can run queries and you can, you know, reorganize the data to look at it in different ways, so that if you wanna say, okay. You know, the people in the town who was really interested in, you know, water service or, you know, establishing sewer districts, you're able to do that.
Or just how these things play out. Everybody versus, yeah,
Sure,
I'm just curious about that.
yeah,
And maybe we'll add that if it seems like there's something interesting. Yeah, that to what's on the online materials and report, because this is
Yeah,
the report the latest.
okay. Anything else? We're good with the survey? Okay, next is the housing element.
So we circulated that around, obviously this is in progress, it's obviously very collaborative, working with you all, receiving your comments. Receiving any data suggestions that you have for us. I put in the share folder that I have. Where the document is and the document that you all marked up. I summarized all of the comments, so any comment that was received, I have it in there just so everyone can see what everyone was thinking, but I figured this would be a guide that we could go through and start to talk about some of these comments, just to make sure that we're aware. I did share them, I let Niels know, I did share it with Eric Cooper, he's one of our senior plan year associates that worked on the housing element chapter, just so he's aware, so he's very much actively working with the town on getting permit data, things of that nature. Answering some of the data concerns that there were. So he's actively working on that, because I know there was a couple comments that were pertaining to the data, or they had a different idea of what the figures might be. So I don't want anyone to think that we're not aware and we're brushing it under the rug. We're very much actively working on that as we speak. But we can go through the comments and then just decide how we'd like to resolve it. And then the plan would be that we would take this back, we would make the revisions, and that the next meeting, have the final chapter for you, to approve. Any questions with that process? We just want to make sure that was a good process. And by all means, I think this is a good opportunity too, especially as we move forward with the elements. If you have any comments on like the format, or if we think it needs to be organized a different way, I think this is a really good time to have those conversations, because obviously we want to make sure this is a plan that is reflective of you, of the community, and something that you're proud of. So starting on page 3.
History or housing?
This is the housing element.
Thanks.
Actually, Angela, I just have
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
quick question, is there gonna be a centralized demographic kind of summary of everything, or is it just gonna be in different chapters, like the land use demographic will be in one chapter and the housing?
So we're gonna
age
have it in
this
the
one?
existing conditions, so how we had that
So
market
you're-
analysis, that'll be part of the overall.
So you're
existing
working on
conditions.
that existing conditions and the
Yes.
demographic stuff?
Yeah, so anything that we tailor here will be tailored in there to make sure that it matches up.
But that's in the works. Right now.
Yes.
Cause that seems like a helpful thing in terms of thinking about all these other things.
And if it's helpful, I can put in, I was thinking about making like a resource folder, or if people want to add to it too, that we can put in the market analysis. I know we have this map, so we can drop maps in there, things like that, if that helps folks along with the review of the elements.
I can't remember, is there an outline too? Do we have like an overall outline? We do, right?
For the comp
For
plan.
the comp plan?
Yeah.
Can you post that too?
Yep.
Just cause I couldn't remember what. Sure.
And the link, so we can just get it without having to try to get it to show.
Yeah.
I know, I can go
I
through
know
the
we talked
links,
about it,
but
but when I was
can't go
reading
in.
through, I was
Yeah.
trying to remember. like,
And then
how it was
overall,
set.
just to ask, so I was planning
Yeah.
on having that, folder I made kind of just be like a library and have each element in there. Did the setup work for you guys? Do you think it was easy to access, easy for you to make comments?
I thought it was
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, when you
But I
sent the
don't-
link that way, that
This
was
is how I do
easier than
everything.
trying to go into SharePoint.
Sure,
Which
okay,
for some
Yeah.
reason my
Yeah.
computer doesn't work.
okay. Okay, good.
And then if
So,
there's,
go ahead, no, it's okay.
I was gonna say for like format questions, because we're kind of jumping, like housing. And now we have it at the, the third element, there's gonna be an introductory chapter. Where we'll get a lot of jargon out in front, talk about references to appendices for like housing data and stuff like that. So that'll all be front loaded. So we don't have that right now, but if there's suggestions of what should be, presented at the beginning to help these elements read better, that'd be
And
helpful to
then
know.
another suggestion I was gonna bring to your attention that I think would be a good idea is if you have a glossary in the front, because obviously there's a lot of different terms in here, and we, within our disciplines might understand it, really easy, but maybe, the average person might not quite understand. So just having that be transparent and have, words defined, I think would go a long way, having that in the beginning.
I think having demographic data and existing conditions at the beginning is helpful because it relates to everything else.
So not, because I think the last one was like more towards the end, so you're thinking of having it front
Well, I
loaded.
don't know, I'm just saying that might be helpful.
Yeah, I can write it.
Or if these relate, refer back to it at the end, having it somewhere, not having it. Makes it a little harder, but I don't know where it should be in the actual plan, I just mean having it is helpful.
Yeah, so I'll make sure then I drop the economic base report. So I have all of that demographic done.
And the current land use data and housing. You already gave us that?
What's that?
You
No, I'm
already-
gonna put it in
Oh,
a
okay.
folder, yeah.
I thought I didn't see that.
Yeah, I'll make like a resources folder
Yeah,
and I
okay,
can drop
thank
all
you.
of that information in there.
It's a
And I can
lot to
just do
keep
that for
track
each
of, so
element
I
to help with
I
your review.
appreciate you tolerating my questions, thank you.
No, it's okay. Okay, so page 3 of the housing element, so. It was brought up, I think it would benefit from being more tightly framed. With how housing choices can contribute to climate and community sustainability. It should specifically explain how housing goals can contribute to a more environmentally healthy community, prioritizing the reduction of sprawl, development of denser housing options that can access. Public utilities and public transportation, etc. A central message theme connected to sustainability is needed to make a tighter connection. So just wanted to bring that comment to the floor and just to see, do others agree with that statement? Is that something you'd like us to address?
Why am I not seeing it on the list?
Number 3, it's on page 3. Which paragraph were you reading?
Yeah, which,
No, excuse
my
me.
first comment,
Wait, you were, she's reading
Very
that
first comment.
oh, line 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's in,
So
it references page 3 of. the
Says-
chat.
Oh, I'm
Well,
I'm
it's in the
down
comments
to
on
We're
there.
in the folder, so you'll
Got
see a
it.
table like this with them all listed, so if you wanna follow along that way, that.
I'm with you.
Yeah, of course.
And Neil sent this out earlier today.
Yeah, no, I have it. I was just on page 3, but this, got it.
I was only saying that because I pulled mine from my email rather than going through SharePoint.
Yeah.
That's-
I think this is an interesting comment.
It's mine.
Also, I left names off, I didn't want you to be like, this person said this person said that, so. But by all means, if you wanna, say it's your comment and, expand on why you said what you said, that's totally okay, but I just didn't wanna make anyone feel uncomfortable.
Oh, you'll see a lot. I have a lot in here. So, no, the only reason I said this, and I think I would say it'd be true for every chapter, is if we are focused on a specific theme, we need to connect of how these different elements impact. And I think that, I don't think it needs to be a long dissertation by any stretch, but I think that a clarifying statement at the beginning of each section makes tighter connections. And it was interesting I wrote my comments are all coming before seeing the full survey results. So that could also be impacted about what things if people were really gung ho about sprawl,
Right.
as a goal, then maybe that would be included, but that was just where I was coming from.
It sounds like a clarifying statement is needed, any other thoughts with that?
I made it, I'm twice, I guess I will. Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if it's like a clarifying statement or just like an explicit like connection, like, I don't think people are gonna. Read and understand always the connections, if we're like constantly like throwing it in the faces, I think that's important, like Caitlin was saying.
Yeah, I'd see what's written here is not quite clarifying as much as, just what Ty just said, but I agree with it, and I think it's good, and I think the sentence is really great the way it's written, so it's that sort of thing. Like the central theme message, I guess that's more what you're talking about than clarifying. Yeah, I think it's a great good point. It's very well stated. Yeah. Since you're a housing person and being historical, I think that's great.
that revision. And then go into the next comment that is referencing page 5. That says 85% of the town outside the village is in agricultural zone. It seems worth noting that under current zoning, there are 2-acre minimums and 400 feet of frontage, as well as restrictions on how many times an agricultural parcel can be subdivided. This has a direct impact on the types of homes that are likely to be constructed and can incentivize sprawl and make different housing types challenging to build, even if they were allowed to be constructed in the ag zone. As it currently stands, the zoning is only effectively allowing duplexes in this zone.
It's also my comment, and it duplex is in addition to single family is what I meant. It's like a denser housing type. There is, the reason I included this is there's also, there are carve outs in the zoning for cluster subdivision, but there's no practical application for cluster subdivision under. It's virtually impossible for someone to do cluster subdivision in any practical way on a parcel size less than an acre per individual house. Because in order to get less than an acre, you have to have some kind of shared sewer system. And Tompkins County in particular is highly resistant to allowing shared ownership of sewer systems between different property owners, which requires one of two things to happen. Either you have single acre parcels with independent, like a cluster development that has single acres, which is still a pretty sizable property, that has its own septic system, or a single owner for the entire property with the cluster housing being developed, being rentals. And Danby's currently exploring whether or not there's ways for a developer to put in a sewer system, a small sewer system for a cluster development, and then turn over ownership actually to the municipality with the formation of a sewer district for that cluster development. Because then, and seeing whether or not it's legally possible to do that, because in theory, we allow cluster development, but in practicality, there's no way to actually feasibly do it. Tompkins County Public Health or Whole Health. And so it's kind of a, when you remove that as being a functional possibility for reasons outside of the town's control, we're left with single family and duplexes at most in 85% of the town. So if affordable housing and denser housing is desirable in certain areas, we're going to need to consider that the zoning is compatible, that if the current zoning is compatible with those potential goals. Did I misstate anything from a zoning officer?
Makes sense.
Yeah,
A practical example of the sewer water allowing the much more dense housing is just to the south of the town of Ulysses there. If you go on Wolf Lane between Dubois and Highway 96 and look at the bottom end of Dubois, right where Wolf Lane goes off, they have 60 houses in about a 30-acre space up through there. But they have public water and public sewer. And that's how they were able to do all that. Because looking at the way the property is actually divided up in that, they're funny little almost florets, the way they interlock the houses. I brought it along just as a picture of what it would look like, because it really is, it's a practical example of what they did. And that sort of stuff to put it all together there. Yeah, what did I do with it? Mine, Lankowski, did you ducks in a row? Yeah, this is, I'll pass this around because this is the way the houses were put together. This is actually that Wolf Lane going across. This is Dubois down here, and this is 96 up on the top end. This is the town line. North of there is town of Ulysses. So like an area just south of Moore's Marine, that abandoned apple orchard is about 40, 50, 60 acres would be a candidate piece of property. If there was a way to expand I don't know how the sewer system for County of Ithaca is tied to the city of Ithaca, or how it works, or where their plant is. I have no idea, because it comes right up to that town line. And this is like a quarter mile down the road or so, but there's places on Dubois up behind the Christmas tree farm and that sort of stuff in that section down there. not active farmland, I'm sure it's still designated as farmland. But would be candidate areas, and then you also have exits, either the 96 and Dubois there, you know, for traffic control. For school systems, because they're in the Ithaca school system, it would not load up the town of Ulysses school system. That part of the town is divided off to the Ithaca school system, so.
I talked to the Ulysses, or I talked to the Ithaca superintendent, not superintendent, supervisor, and the town of Ithaca is willing to explore connections with their sewer system. For the
Okay.
town of Ulysses.
That seems like it could be a bit more feasible, like areas like that, than just building a
Right.
small separate one, just at the developer's cost. I just remember in the last long ago now, you know, big zoning revision where people were talking about cluster developments, and one of the issues was roads, and the developer would have to make the road, and everybody thought
Yes.
right now with the demand, then maybe now it's different. They wouldn't even want to do a road because it was too expensive. So I think those kind of trying to explore any sort of connections, village or Ithaca that we can are really a good idea. They might be more financially feasible than
Yeah.
trying to get a developer
And
to
the
decide to
land-
invest that money.
Yeah, the angle of the land along Dubois is not outrageously steep, you know, for connection of pump systems and that sort of stuff, so.
And I think that also rings true to kind of what we've heard in focus groups of, just finding target areas of, if we're gonna have growth and we're gonna have infrastructure, where does it make sense? I think, identifying areas like that is exactly what folks were looking for.
Connect to potentially existing, or like there's a more likely other services nearby.
More feasible.
Yeah. And we can look that within the.
And additionally, on page 5, there was a comment that it would be useful to explain if this is an increase or decrease from the current population figures, is the county projected to stable, growing, increasing, so we could put clarification for that as well.
Well, Niels had sent out early in the year a population study that Tompkins County had done in 2022. And in there, it showed that the town, or Tompkins County was at about 103,000 in 2011. And the town of Ulysses was at just under 4,900, like 4,890 something. And in 2021, which is the next set of data they had, Tompkins County had grown to 106,000. And the town of Ulysses had added 39 residents. We were up to 49, some odd number.
And we never quite correct 5,000.
Yeah, anyway, but it gives you an approximate idea of where we're at.
It gives us some flexibility to report filing, which I would deeply love once a year.
I remember it switched
5,000 people.
I remember it switched something and I was always like, sure, when I was doing that, yeah.
Have to be inclusive village.
Well, then including the village, should be over 5.
We are still under 5,000. Village lost population last census by like 120 people, and the town gained more than that. So we had an overall growth, but the village lost.
It wasn't enough yet.
Do it.
And then going on to page 6. So there was a comment regarding the Village Grove of just confirming that name. So it's officially called Crescent Way.
It is.
Okay, great.
It's changed several times.
It has.
so
It has.
I was just I think now the official, now that's up and
It
running,
is.
is Crescent Way, so I just figured. we should-
No, we want to make sure we're the most accurate.
There.
So that is very much
So
so.
many,
Yeah,
so many
that's
ways.
Like, yeah, so where there was
Very
no.
hard to
what
make
was
everybody
other
happy
things
before
correct,
that even, right?
right? So-
Crescent Square was the funniest one. in my opinion.
Yeah.
It was not a square, so that's all I.
Oh, no, that's okay. Like I said, these comments are all great. Like I said, this is meant to be a very collaborative process, so these comments are really great. Very helpful. Also on page 6, there was a comment regarding the impact of student rentals. in general about student rentals and that, they thought that the larger concern would be seasonally occupied properties. I doubt that the town has many student renters, given their distance from Cornell and Ithaca College.
That was me also.
I mean, I think you could, you know, add that seasonal, I mean, that certainly.
Certainly. the
probably a
lakes
higher
are
number than the
very
student.
seasonal.
Sure.
And the seasonal rentals isn't my concern. It was called out about student rentals and I just didn't think that that was necessarily much of an impact here.
Should be, that would, I think you're correct.
And then I think, not to jump or anything, but I think this comes up later. So as far as short-term rentals, does the town have a process? Like, do you have a registry at all?
No.
Of short-term rentals? So there's no like
No.
short-term rental code or anything like that? Cause I know, I think somebody had a question of, can we see, short-term versus long-term rentals?
Right, but the county is tracking it. for
Okay,
sales
that was gonna
tax.
be my next thing. I was gonna
So-
say, I would look at the county level, but
Yeah.
sometimes if, towns have a registry, sometimes that's a nice way for us to take a look.
So it went into effect January 1st this year, but now short-term like Airbnb and Vrbo and the other companies all have to actually turn over sales tax remittance and occupancy tax remittance directly to the county, and I operate some in a different township. And so it's a very different change. Before that, it was self-remitting and a lot of people, I'm sure, weren't doing it.
No, they definitely.
So I think that over the course of this year, we might have a better sense of what's actually happening in the town based on what's getting remitted on a quarterly basis to the
Yeah.
state and county.
So we can follow up with the county, get a little bit.
I would hope so,
more information
yeah.
To see what they can provide to us.
For that comment on page 7, it may be worth noting that these types of developments are currently prohibited in the zoning. What is that? I'm not quite seeing it on page 7, what that addresses. Sorry.
I think it was just right after that last paragraph when it's talking about housing characteristics.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
This is kind of embarrassing. So many of these are mine, and I honestly don't remember off the top of my head, Roxanne. I'm sorry,
No,
which one that
I
refers
just- I
to.
was trying to follow along, but I think it might have to do with townhomes and
Yeah,
units of buildings. I see it now. Okay.
that's probably what it is, yeah.
So we're thinking a clarifying statement for that, for your comment on page 7.
I don't have the master one, so.
I think it's more of a note just to us as we're
Or as we're.
reviewing,
Okay,
to note
yeah,
that some of those housing types are actually not allowed.
Right.
Currently,
Sure.
so is that then leading to a recommendation for zoning change or continued prohibition or whatever it might be? I
Yeah,
think
maybe just.
I don't know, the way I read it, it
notation
seems
that
more
it-
like,
Yeah, it includes, it's related to the zoning, and so
Sure.
that might be, yeah. Just a note there.
Because I think it'd be really useful as we go through it, if we were able to identify the recommendations that are being made that are currently in contradiction to town zoning, because the next logical step is to update your zoning in compliance with your comp plan, and so having those identified. I mean, because I know all the members of this committee are immediately going to want to transition to the zoning committee, right? So you'll have all the institutional knowledge.
Mr. Carl, I was really excited.
And
You might not want to, as
And you could get to year 5.
Yeah.
just stay here forever, because when we're done with that, then we need to do a new comp plan, you know? So, anyway, so just having that, I think would be great for institutional knowledge.
For
Thank you.
sure. And on page 8, I know there's a couple tables here and there's some questions about the housing units. So that is something that Eric is aware of, that he's currently looking at. And can provide a response for.
Well, that one is particularly troubling because I sent back a requirement to you guys to fix that in January already, that the 0.0 new houses in 5 years jumps right out and says it cannot be true. And we sent it back to you guys to fix this. And in 3 months, nobody from your group bothered to talk to Mark Washburn, our town code guy, who is ground truth for knowing what was built, And I find that really troubling because if your data tables are all coming off of what your analysts have easily available on their computers, and something like a 0.0 doesn't jump out as a potential problem and you do some more effort to look at it, or if we as the town send back to you to say, this cannot be true for the town of Ulysses, and then you ignore it, that for me is a real problem, because as a member voting on this, I need to feel comfortable that what I'm recommending to the town board to accept is real.
Yeah.
And if it's obviously bogus, then I'm gonna have a real problem with dealing with this whole package. Then
No, I understand.
one issue for dealing with me is I'm a numbers nut. You know, numbers jump out and talk to me. A lot of other stuff I totally ignore, but
No, Eric is actively working with Mark, with Niels. I know he's getting permit data. I know he's actively working through this. I know he did express that, you know, he was aware that there was some new housing, but it wasn't enough of a percent change that it was gonna be really visible. So I know that was something he weighed in on, and I know he is willing to, you know,
well,
Visible.
with
relative to-
2,500 houses in the town, give or take, that's
Right.
2.5 new houses is 0.1%. And you're trying to tell me it's 0.0% in 5 years. I talked to 2 local realtors and I already identified 6 houses in a matter of about 1 day's time, which is up already at 0.2. So
yeah,
what I'm saying, there ought to be within your group, when you're creating stuff like this, there should be some common sense level or somebody that has enough broad knowledge to look through this, and things like that would jump out and say, this can't be real. You know, the town's been building 5 homes a year or 10 homes a year for 20 years, and then all of a sudden they, COVID or no COVID, it doesn't come to a complete stop.
I understand. Well, like I said, Eric is actively working on it. I know he's working with the town. He's also been in touch with Brent from the Ithaca Board of Realtors, so we're getting all of our data, so he's gonna update this, and then we will certainly will report back and make sure it's reflective.
Thank you for your vigilance. Appreciate it.
Well, no, we have a really nice broad group, and that's kind of what I'm hoping that all of us, as we read through this, there are things that talk to us in different ways. And if you see something that doesn't make sense, stick your hand up and say something about it, because the planning board is gonna live with this document for the next
Sure.
15 to 20 years.
For sure.
So I got a vested interest from the planning board side of trying to get this thing right from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanna make sure we're right, and like I said, this is reflective, it's accurate, so.
If you don't mind, I just want to give us a quick time check. I think we had intended to maybe spend 20 or 30 minutes on this housing element. I don't know, just putting that out there. We're probably at that mark right now. So I don't know if we
And you have another one to get through.
have another one to get through. So 30 minutes. So I don't know if we have a
Are there ones that maybe?
thoughts.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you can.
Or can we make comments on the comments?
I more was just thinking, are there like big ones that really require discussion?
I think that was the big one, just to, like I said, actively, you know, reiterate that we are actively working. I know there's, like, Carl brought up the data issue, so we are working through that. Updating that, I think, you know, there's a couple of comments that are pertaining to that, so we're actively working through those, so I just wanna make sure that that was communicated.
Yeah.
Roxanne, I just wanted to raise something related to that. I don't know if that these presentations are somewhere on the town's archives, but when they did the zoning update and they hired David West and
Yeah.
CJ Randall and West. To do that, when they had the first open house meetings and all, they had several slides and analyses where they had growth from like the 70s, you know, new houses and as a visual, and it was really pretty interesting. And so it's worth looking to see if we have that, because that would even put this into a even more historical, longer term context without requiring more work. I don't know where it would be if they ever gave us that, or if
Yeah.
they just did it. I mean, I don't know if they still have their archives in their business. I mean, CJ's still around, so we could ask her maybe if we can't find it, but it's worth a look anyway. Would be
It
interesting.
might be on SharePoint.
Yeah.
See if it's there. I know you made a comment, so I can track that down. For the sake of efficiency, and I unfortunately have to leave it at about 6:40 and only to go swap on childcare. But in the housing section, I pushed back on, and it shows up in multiple comments, so I think those could probably be condensed, is and I teach in this field, so I have a lot of passion related to it. Adaptively reusing existing buildings is literally the most environmentally sustainable thing one can possibly do. The embodied energy encapsulated in existing buildings, if you were to replace an existing building, even one that is not energy efficient, with a new building, it takes 80 years on average to have energy savings that offset the carbon loss of the previous building. So I will push back hard, and the way Carl will push back on numbers, I will push back hard on the idea that we need to demolish our way to a sustainable future. We need to adaptively develop our way to a sustainable future with appropriate new construction that complements and achieves energy sustainability goals. So that's where I came down really hard in this section. And it'll be true in the historic preservation section as well, because that's my other, my intersection is historic preservation and sustainability. So I hope that the committee can also back that. And if you want me to really bore you to sleep, I can give you lots of other information about it. But yeah.
Yeah, new construction can be much lower.
Oh,
energy
absolutely.
and sustainability, but
Yeah.
yeah, so there's those two.
Oh, and I'm not anti-new construction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want to demolish things.
I mean,
Right.
for sure.
There's a time
We
and place to
definitely have a
rebuild.
choir over here. That's all for using building materials and recycling.
I think, is there a way also, when you look at the new housing, right, for Carl, to maybe also see what the intersection, like how that came to be? Like, I see like Willow Creek, and I'm like pretty sure that's some family land that was sold. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like existing farmland, now it's like, I don't know if that matters, but just to kind of see.
Change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a report, our John Zepko did it.
Yeah.
Independently of the town board asking for it, incidentally, but he was actually looking back in 2018-ish about conversion of land, because there was concern it was happening, ag land was getting gobbled up too much, and I think his findings showed that there was some consistent conversion, but it wasn't happening at a rapid rate. But we can pull that up. Would you mind adding that one to your list? Because I don't have.
And while you're talking about lists before people start departing, I did want to let you know, just looking back through my emails, I was able to confirm that it was 2018, May of 2018, there was a public hearing. I had communications with Liz Thomas in 2018, confirming to me agreement that the West Shore Homeowners Association was putting out inaccurate information regarding the survey, and very importantly, because I believe this is MRB who's doing the consulting right now. It was MRB who did the consulting for that Lakeshore Water Survey.
Okay, so 2018, I'll look back in.
Yes.
I have the supervisor's emails from back then, so I can go digging.
And I can ask our team internally before I was there, but I certainly can do my homework and find out as well.
Right. And we can ask Liz, because she is right around.
Not me,
still.
Liz.
No,
Liz
like I said,
Thomas.
have just a resource
For the record,
folder,
sorry, yeah.
updated, you know, when we have updated tables, figures, maps, reports.
Cause she,
I'll
Thank you.
put them in there, absolutely.
we do have the historical knowledge available too, so.
On this, I'm curious on what folks thought about some of the, I guess they were policies or goals. I don't know, I'm confusing myself now.
On housing?
On housing, yes.
okay.
Oh, sorry, I was going back to housing.
Oh, no, you're okay.
In terms of establishing standards and both for aesthetic purposes and templates and so forth, there's a couple different policies or recommendations for policies and next steps that are associated with specifically that item. Curious on how people read those and if it's something we wanna include and consider.
think we talked about it in the historic preservation element too.
Yeah, I think, I came across it in both sections.
Yeah, so we could talk about that.
Any thoughts?
Where is that?
Well, it was in the housing, there's,
It's on page 24.
24.
I think it starts.
Like, there's
23.
adopt template house plans that meet the environmental aesthetic visions for the
Oh,
town.
there you go.
Encourage
I knew I
construction
read
of
it, but-
prefab housing such as modular. And manufactured home yurts, container houses and tiny homes. Like,
Seems like at least having a template, but that's what the town's constraints are with regard to those types of housing, doing them, what would work and what wouldn't work. In addition to templates would be helpful to people.
I mean, there's the code that's gonna require setbacks and height restrictions depending on zoning districts and all that.
Well, but some types of manufactured housing aren't allowed in particular places, right? Or if it's considered
Well,
a trade,
yeah.
like if it's on a foundation, I mean, there were issues about whether it was on a foundation and things like that.
So we're now running into Fair Housing Act. And I have talked to the town attorney and there may be some language in our zoning currently that's banning things that we're not actually allowed to ban.
Correct.
And so we're going to, and you did include that, the fair housing components and the objective component part. So a reconciliation of that, I think, would be necessary.
Right, so I thought there was.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
stuff like that,
I don't
yeah.
actually know what it says in the zoning, so that would be helpful to, as we go through this discussion, to understand it a little better.
Could set up an appointment to talk to Niels and he get that too.
There's also a limitation of 2 livable structures on most lots. And, that's something if there's agreement that there could or should be more of these accessory dwelling units, I think that would need to be relooked at, particularly for larger lots that have space.
Yeah, I think we do have fairly permissive AUD laws in a lot of cases, or at least that was the,
It's just one.
you can have one, right? Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're 1 acre or 100 acres.
Because it was the elder cottage that became an AUD, and that was in the zoning change, and apparently you're not allowed to have too many elders. So then now you're.
Yeah, I personally think that's too restrictive for someone who has, like you said, particularly 100-acre lot or something.
On the big picture, I think you commented on Liz's comment. As far as like design standards and more that may be fleshed out, especially if we start talking about historic districts, because communities like Jacksonville may want design standards part of it. But one thing we found in my past work is that when municipality has front loaded modular homes or whatever that the building official has already said these are going to go, it streamlines the review process like super fast and makes the overall affordability much more available for people. So it's
Yeah,
Makes a
okay,
huge
I think that makes sense. In my head, I was thinking that was going. Like, in East Hampton, for instance. There is an architectural review board that you have 5 colors to choose from for a roof and 5 colors for cedar plank siding. And I don't want to get to that level of review. So maybe I took it too far in
You're looking
thinking
at
that like restrictions.
restricted.
I don't think
Yeah.
we have or should be looking into that. It's
Yeah.
still personal respect, like personal preference for what your
but
house
in
is. We're
general,
looking
like
at
some more
if there's a
general
template or
standards.
something that's kind of like already been reviewed and approved by our zoning officers and our building code officer, like.
Yes, what the
I can see
template
that.
does is it streamlines the process
Yes.
and it makes it a lot more affordable. for-
Yes.
It does.
Yes, I can see that, so that, I think I was thinking.
I
maybe
think
it
that
could be
was
too
kind of what I
restrictive.
was
No,
thinking.
I don't
Yeah.
want it to be too restrictive.
Yes.
The other, and but we may want to think about it in the more development side. You may want commercial development that's new build to look a certain way. There's a big difference between the variations of, say, a Dollar General
Yes.
from one community that has design standards for commercial development versus another, but that's a
And
different story.
commercial, I find is different than housing.
But in the housing section, I was able to, and I think I may have included this as a comment, I was able to talk, and it was a very like off the record sideline conversation, with the director of INHS. And it does sound like they have an appetite to work with, communities and developers, that they have designs. And that they'd be willing to share them, and that makes it a lot cheaper to not have to hire your own architect and go through all the soft costs, if there could be some way to partner with somebody else to facilitate essentially pre-approval on certain design approaches.
I agree. I think that already exists and they're using modular, they're doing factory built stuff, which is different than manufactured homes and,
And the reality is
designs
that
are out there already.
we do, and there was another comment in here, and I don't disagree with it. We have a lot of local builders, but the fact remains that independent local builders, it's a lot more expensive to have an independently local built custom designed house than it is. I mean, so I think there needs to be a range of options, as opposed to that we're saying you only can do one of these lanes, obviously.
Just as a set aside on that manufactured housing or factory built housing, it definitely meets sustainability goals.
Yeah.
The amount of waste is very little.
Well, and we can include things about, and within them, like having heat pumps or things like that, because those can come that way, and then it's much less expensive into the future for the people to heat with them. So it helps with sustainability and affordability.
Yeah.
And to the sustainability financially too.
Unless you find a modular company in Florida and you're traveling it all the way up there.
Other factor.
Sorry,
True.
Yeah.
mine came from Scranton, so
I
it
was
wasn't
gonna say,
that
I
far.
think there are some in the Northeast.
Or not Scranton, so Sunday, Pennsylvania.
Well, INHS was put 4 modular homes down there on Sears Street in Ithaca. On about a half block, what used to be a parking lot in there that the county owned that they put them in. And they're like 2 or 3 bedroom units. It's just-
Yeah. Anything else? You wanna dig into on the housing? That's fine, I'm not trying to take your time.
No,
Sorry.
do it, do it.
No, you're good.
Co-chair,
No,
see?
do you have a comment?
Well, just, I think it's page 14, you guys referenced the town of, Trumansburg, area code. But about, 20% of the town is actually in the Ithaca area code.
Yeah, so that's a good catch. Yeah. And they will remind you, as they should. They will remind you if you don't.
Well, I just think for data purposes, when you're looking at what's out there, if you're only looking at one zip code, it's gonna.
It's interesting too, though, but I have family who are in Seneca County. Zip code's 14886. So I wonder if there's a way to dive down, because that's outside of the town of Ulysses too.
Yeah.
It's very complicated.
It is, no, it is.
Jacksonville used to have even a different.
There's a post office
I feel
there.
like there's one for the post office, but
I thought there was zip code right back, maybe they changed it.
I don't. So, just to keep us
Moving.
on track. We're off track. Can we get us on track? What else?
Yeah, so I think with these comments, and I'll kind of like leave it up to you guys of how we want to do this. Like I said, I did put this in our shared folder for each element. So if people want to review, if they want to add, additional context or, additional comments, I think that would help us as we go do these revisions so that we can have it to be approved at the next meeting. And then I would say the same for historic preservation, because obviously we have a very short time, we're gonna, get through that, but obviously, if folks want to take the time to review those comments or to add additional comments, that you're able to do so. It's a Word document, so you should be able to just go in and edit it. Does that seem fair to you guys? Cause I don't want it to like cut it short and think that, everyone's comment wasn't important, I wanna make sure that we address them all and that everyone feels good about it.
Just with regard to, then we can take it up and do what, like, what does that mean? I mean, then we like approve that chapter, or is it going to then be reviewed like when we have the next public input meeting and, so it's starting to structure the comp plan as a.
Yeah, so it's like we're
moving
building
to
it
like
as
a
we
more
go.
final draft, but it's
Yeah.
still gonna have another round, like we haven't had the second public meeting yet. So
We're just
I'm just
basically
trying to see
making
how
sure
those
that you,
things fit together. then.
yeah, basically making sure that, you know, you're okay with the edits that were made and it's, you know, an element that you feel good about, because obviously we are gonna bring it to the public when we have our second public event and then they can review it too. And then obviously if there's, you know, just comments or, you know, things that we need to address that the public is, you know, actively vocal about it.
Might be,
So like the next one's like draft for public comment.
you say it might be worth calling it a draft here. It does not.
Yeah,
call-
draft
yeah.
element, yeah.
And then draft with public comment.
So
Because it's all
draft,
drafted,
initial
updates are
draft.
drafted until it's adopted.
Right, no, but it doesn't,
draft for comment.
it's not titled draft, unless anybody read it, they might get confused about that, so just.
I'll title it for.
Yeah, that's,
So it's.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's like the free flow of the draft idea there.
At what point in this process can I share it with the rest of the planning board? To start getting their inputs on it?
I would use the next draft,
Okay,
but I mean, these are public documents, so they're not secretive.
right.
But I think for substantive comment, the next round, I think would probably make most logical sense.
All right.
When you asked a question about, or when you made a comment about if we had formatting and things like that, one thing that I thought was really great in the 2009, and I can tell you, I use it all the time, is at the back of that plan is the objectives and like the hit points of like what each recommendation is under it. That's really useful to be able to go back and just look. It's a very consolidated
A
list of
matrix,
like,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
if we can end up with something like that at the end, I think it'd be, I would love
For my
that.
sake too, if somebody's just like, you know, what is the skinny of like, what do
Yeah.
you want to accomplish here, they can go there, so that was
Yeah.
gonna be a recommendation of mine of having just an overall matrix
Perfect.
for each element. Just kind of.
Oh, sorry, that's promoting, they can read it.
Yeah.
Just,
There's nothing. Allison has a message for you.
But I have that same question as Carl with regard to the conservation sustainability, because the idea is you're supposed to, or the BCA is supposed to bring it back to those groups, right? That's why we're on this committee, so it should be after a next iteration of it, and then they would give their input, and it's gonna be iterated or. I'm just trying to figure out how the process is working a little
Yeah,
bit.
well, that's why I was
Same
asking,
question.
yeah. The same thing for the, you know, for the BZA.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. So for these two chapters, we have them, we've read them once, we'll go back and. Provide comments on the comments or suggestions, you guys are also reviewing them at the same time and editing.
And
them.
editing, yeah.
So then in June. At our June meeting, we'd have like these two kind of ready for the next step, which I would think that would probably be the right time to go out and we can even start, I don't know, when we want to post them on the public website. We can talk about that, but when's our September is when we're talking about the next public meeting, right?
Right.
So by that point, we have, everything will get posted, so folks can actually provide good comments and good content. But I think in June for these two chapters.
And then we would have whatever comments our groups had.
Right,
Back to it,
into,
in like a written summary or something.
yep,
Okay.
yep, and then we could consider that with the public comments. I don't think we wanna do another iteration. It depends on what they have there.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that what you're thinking, Nancy?
No, but
No.
it's, wait, oh,
The process. How
I
should
thought
we
you said
need to
that
do it?
sounded weird. Oh,
No.
just no. No, good point, but that might be, for our next steps. We can talk about it. But,
Apologize, I will.
Like taxi.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Right. So, all right, it's 6:40.
So we can, have the comments here for the history and built environment. Did anyone, and it'd be quicker to do it this way, is there any major comments that anyone had that people would like to discuss? So they want comment by comment.
Seems like most of them are. Caitlin's comments, this is her. This is her thing, yeah.
NTD means note to draft. Sorry, so you think that we use like. For number 2,
Okay,
like will town be capitalized? There's a couple
And
places
different-
where
yes,
like they're
so
upper
yes.
lowercase, but like the NTD is just, I don't know why. That was a carryover.
well, that's okay.
General comment, I guess I should say.
I think in that one, like my experience is. It can go both ways, right? If it's short for saying the town of Ulysses, then it's generally capitalized, but if it's just the town. Then it's not, so. We'll have to figure out
I think there was a couple of it.
which way.
So whichever way we do, just make sure it's consistent.
Consistent, yeah.
For sure.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
The title of it is the historic, not history, right? It's historic
It's historic, yeah.
and built environment. So to me, when I read that, maybe it's just a planning term that I'm not clear on, but the built environment to me is it's housing, it's everything. And this is not really talking about that. It's just talking about historic buildings mostly, right? So I just find that, and maybe you can just explain it to me, or if anybody else finds it confusing, what this chapter. I would look at this and think it talks about, like, say, all buildings and all housing, not just historic buildings.
I think we're also talking about, we talk about like streetscaping and like the fabric of the town. I think that's really kind of what we're talking about in a more general scope.
So maybe there's another term for that, or maybe no one else finds it confusing, but I just wonder if the public would.
Well, I think it's confusing to the extent that I think the built environment is more general and you're combining it with the historic aspect, which almost seems like it's a more specific subtype of it. So I think I agree with what you're saying, that seems like there might be a more effective title with subtitles.
If it said built environment to include historic
But,
resources, would that make more sense? Like we're talking about everything and also.
well, you're not talking about everything, though. You're not talking about any housing other than
Yeah.
historic buildings. Because housing is in a totally different chapter.
Yeah,
So you're talking about,
the other stuff.
yeah, so
I mean, then I guess it poses the question, should historic just be,
I know, I
on
don't know
its
why
own.
it's on.
Could be historic and aesthetics. Like, is this like you said, the framework or
The fabric
the
of the
fabric
town,
of
yeah.
the town? Aesthetics covers a little too much too, but
It's much broader.
is that like more?
Yeah, I don't know, I just find it an odd chapter. I'd like title and then,
Should
I guess
one
there's
be
some
a,
overlap,
yeah,
but
yeah,
should one be a subchapter of the?
that's what I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking.
Right,
the built,
if the built environment is overarching. Is it?
We can also further elaborate, like in the first paragraph of what built environment encapsulates, so that the reader understands that better.
Yeah, because it is
Just
real
more
jargon.
context.
yeah, right, and maybe there's a better title, but.
And yeah, is history, does that mean historic buildings? Is that what that's supposed to, or is
Yeah,
history?
Historic
Okay,
resources.
Oh,
and
okay,
Built
alright, okay.
environment is what it's.
So historic
got it,
resources goes beyond just structures.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, to me,
Yeah, it's very unclear.
built environment is, like you said, the structures. Housing brings in more of the people component to me. But there is definitely overlap between,
And built environment, it's not just housing, it's
Right.
all construction, non-residential as well.
commercial, everything.
Yeah, and like Angelina said, it's also, we start talking about the streetscape too. Sidewalks, all that stuff.
So, but why is historic resources grouped with that particularly? When it's such a big overarching thing, it seems like a very narrow focused thing grouped with a very overarching thing.
Yeah.
And so
Some,
maybe there's a rearrangement of the way that chapter is or something. I don't know.
It seems like there could be an umbrella even above that's something like community design standards. That incorporates the current and the historic.
Well, are these typical chapters and plans? Is this like a template?
I know this is how we had the focus group and how the elements were presented to me, but I am not opposed if we want to rename them, rework them, like I'm all for it.
so again, New York State doesn't have any dictation of what you have to do if you're gonna have to do it. So it's more of looking at other municipalities, and some have just a historic, they don't talk about the built environment, some people just have a built environment. They don't talk about historic, we can do whatever, I mean, we could even parse it out. I would suggest not having two different elements, but I do kind of like the idea of having a larger umbrella maybe. And just talking about maybe historic resources as support, that could work.
And it sounds like if there was a clear definition, that would be more grounding for
Yeah.
everybody
Right, and then,
of what these encapsulate.
Yeah, I do think you read that title.
yeah,
Most of us don't really know what it means.
yeah, I mean, I read it to my husband and I was like, what would you think this meant? And it was like. All the buildings, not just, and I asked a couple of other people, who got even different answers, but sort of like that, so.
And down the road, where I suggest, I know I obviously suggested a glossary, but I think once we get to like, the designing part of the plan of, having those keywords, on sidebars or things like that, and having them defined, as you're reading, I think would help too, just to give additional context to the reader.
So maybe it would be that instead of the built environment. Element is the new chapter and then the historic resources are
Just like a component of it.
component of it. Because maybe recreation goes in here or something too, I mean, which
I
is a
know.
big thing that everybody,
Everybody's more land use.
right, but I know, it's very.
Well, if it all kind of functions under design, it is.
I
it's
know,
hard to-
yeah,
Well, then communities also put recreation under well-being, community
Mhm.
well-being,
Yeah.
well,
so.
so the built environment is really like.
Human made.
Transportation, because that's another thing. too.
Everything but environment and natural resource.
Anything human-made.
So not.
Right, but that is just a huge thing. It's everything is under that, almost, that, much of what we're talking about in this plan is under the built environment.
Yeah.
But I
art
think-
Style.
I think Karen probably nailed it almost perfectly. It's community image is really what built environment is talking about. It's the end product once construction is done of how it presents to the community.
Okay. So maybe changing the title then, because I just find built environment super confusing.
People what community image is it kind of?
I feel like community image
Character,
gets into,
Community,
Comes into its own
yeah,
problems.
Yeah.
maybe there isn't. a
People
good
might
idea,
think
but
that is like.
Perhaps we
people
could
focus on
bat
that.
around another word and you can talk to your planner colleagues and
Yeah.
other people can think about it a little, just as an
Mhm.
idea anyway. Look at some other plans and see what.
Is it
it's
the word
called
built or is it
Yeah.
the word environment that's the problem? Like if it said design environment, or if it was a different word other than built, would that make more sense?
It probably would to me, To me, the built environment is. Everything that we're talking about, land use is under it, and housing is under it. Transportation systems are under it. It's like you said, it's anything that's not natural. Reoccurring. Well,
And I
that's just
think-
me, maybe it makes sense.
Also. Thinking broad picture in the introduction chapter, it might be good to have a quick synopsis of what each chapter is gonna be. So that when we, you're looking at it, you can say, okay, if I'm wanting to look for X, Y, Z, I'm gonna look at this element for these groups of elements, so.
Like a definition of each element, basically.
So maybe.
at the start, you mean, where you could just
Yeah.
like click on that.
Yep.
So-
Inspired.
No, that's a valid conversation, because it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if we're having, you
But
know,
I do-
issues within our group understanding, that only means, you know, somebody else outside of us is gonna have a hard time. So, I'll make sure it's clear.
I just
Oh,
wasn't
one thing I
completely clear
did
where I
wanna
was grouping this
bring
for.
up is, in the beginning, so. So when we talk about the implementation of historic resource policy since the last comp plan, so that was based off of, if you remember last fall, we did an exercise where we looked at the last comprehensive plan and all of the policies, and you guys marked like if it was implemented or not, so that's what I used as my guide when I was preparing it, but you know, folks had comments of like, well, we've done this or we've done that, so if I said like no implementation or nothing's been done, it's because nothing was left there in the comments, so I think that's an opportunity to just confirm with you all if, you know, there has been some progression, that we notate that. So I think that's where, that was something I really wanted to focus on tonight as well, and just like I said, when you have access to edit this, if you wanna give some explanation of, you know, if there was some progress with the implementation that I'm aware, and then we can add that in. And that starts, just so you know, on page 3, and it goes through page 5. So it basically just has the policy, the implementation status, like I said, if people did provide a comment, that was acknowledged in there. But if there wasn't anything in there, I can't confirm or deny, so. So if you, like I said, if you have input and you can provide some clarification, I'm happy to update that.
Yeah, it does seem, you know, as you read through it, like it's reasonably defined and this element's not meant to be freestanding and all that, so. I mean, maybe moving the, you know, the bullet points down a little and having the elements not meant to be freestanding up a little bit more, but then making historic preservation one part of it, where you have, you know, the policy areas that are related to with land use and all, that might just make it more clear, because the text that's written is, you know, certainly makes sense. That it's not meant to be freestanding, it relates to a lot of other elements, you know, maybe this is, you know, an early chapter in the plan, so people can see where else to go, but
That sounds good.
just holding out historic as like its own thing in it was, I guess, what really confused me.
So more general.
Yeah, so maybe that would work.
And that might be able to, there was a comment too about the, bringing up the Native Americans. History
Oh, yeah.
with them,
Yeah.
and the ongoing activities or resources and information output that people in this area are trying to recognize, that can fit under that more.
For sure,
That's more cultural resources.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, we can call for resources, historical resources, and then just
We can leave archaeology.
maybe, or whatever, all of them, it just makes more sense.
We can reorganize that, and then, like I said, people wanna scope through these comments again, if they wanna add some clarification, you're able to do that. Do we wanna give a time frame, Neil, of when we would want these comments? Just so we have enough time to edit.
How much time do you need to compile everything?
If I give folks a week, is that helpful? So we can have time to kind of go through these comments. Get ahead.
A week from today, yeah,
I probably need a week and a half, just next week, exactly, I have a like a deadline on the 16th.
What
So
did we do? Do you wanna just do?
if I could just
do
have
we
it
did
on
a
the day
Sunday?
after. the
If we do, not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday, is that enough time?
That's
So
fine.
that you have the weekend time?
It's like the 18th.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing this on Mother's Day.
No, that's, that would be.
I know.
Yeah.
So you're doing.
Oh, yeah, so
Next
you'll,
week. Right, so we need
not
to
Sunday, the following
Next.
Sunday, exactly,
That
that'd
would
be great, okay, perfect.
So
'Cause I know
that
we're-
would be the
got A lot of things.
18th.
18th, yeah, okay. That's for both of these?
Yes, yeah.
I won't try to articulate the long thing, I just went through in my comments, so you have that already. So.
And as far as another thing, I just wanted to gauge, because now that we had this meeting, we have a better understanding. Do we think 2 chapters at a time, is that good? Do you feel like you want a third one, or are you good with 2? Is that like reasonable?
There's 10 total.
So it's like 2 a time, is that like okay for you guys?
How far along are you, since I just joined?
2, 1 and 2.
You're gonna make, you just came to the beginning.
Hang on,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Good
under like
timing.
10
Great.
months later.
Yeah, no,
We've
I'm
reviewed
not-
all the chapters.
I know with us like revising like these chapters, us doing new chapters, I just wanna, I don't wanna overwhelm you either, but I just wanna make sure. Does this pace seem okay for you guys?
I don't. I don't wanna be doing this until
But
No,
that take it two at a time to
Yeah.
take us into September before we got first look at the last 2 chapters.
I'm a little nervous about that.
Were there any
Just-
that were
But
short?
it's
There were
also
some
the
that were
summer, a
shorter.
lot of
I
people.
was just gonna say, just as a reference, we spent a lot of time today looking at the vision and the survey report.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I'm not worried about here. I'm more thinking about like time frame at home and, well, yeah,
And here, but both.
yeah, but I guess it was here too.
Well, maybe we try 3 and. If it's.
Are they all
like
around
too
the
much,
same length?
They should all roughly be around the same length.
Now, let's give it a shot at 3 for the next one, plus the iteration off of these. And I'll be quiet about a lot of stuff.
That's not-
No, we want you to talk.
I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Like, if it takes longer, it does, but it's what.
Anyway, that would give us a shot. We'd be halfway through then by,
Yeah.
with the iteration going into July. So,
I mean, the other thought, it almost seems easier. But I don't know if it's possible with the meeting structure to do 2 at a time. So your brain doesn't get too confused with all the different topics at once. But then have a meeting every 3 weeks instead of every 4 weeks, but then it's probably challenging because of. Availability of space, overlap with other people's
Yeah, we
commitments.
did
including
talk
my own.
about, we did talk about that kind of. Stuff with one month, but.
It's just since we did the vision.
We could try, yeah.
And we had the community survey, so that took.
Can we just try 3 for June?
Yeah.
Let's try it. I mean, it's probably the worst month ever.
Well, it's just so,
But
Just to
let's just do it.
put it
and
out there,
put it-
I think we should try, but we should also, maintain that we don't wanna give up. Discussion
yeah.
to just get through it.
yes. I will be, I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna be here on that day.
What day is it?
I'll
It's
be
a
here.
Wednesday, June 4th.
June 4th?
Hey, Niels, did you send out group
And is it 5 to 7?
appointments?
Mhm.
they are
Cause it used to be
also
5:30, we changed it to 5 o'clock.
We
and
changed it to
updated, they were at a different
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
so
Just
they're all
have more
getting
time to
updated each
review,
time,
yeah,
and
cover
you and
stuff
Kim are
for-
now on those.
Great,
Oh, the
So,
calendar invite
at the end of this
says
meeting,
5:30.
Football.
Yeah,
great.
So you'll,
right,
alright, so we're
but
gonna
the
do
agenda.
3
5,
for this month,
so
for
that,
June.
Yeah.
Plus we owe you the comments on these 2 that we just went through, just to wrap that up. And then. There's no vision, there's no community survey, correct?
well,
It's
there's
just the
the
3 chapters.
vote on the vision, so that'll be a quick discussion. At the next
Oh, you
meeting,
have to
right?
vote on the vision statement.
Or whatever,
In June.
just
Yeah, in June.
looking
Yeah.
at it
Can we
anyway.
do a preliminary vote?
Yeah.
Online, we'll just do.
I'm
go
fine with
online,
that.
do you want, just to save time?
Mhm.
Yeah, where we all look at it.
Yeah,
but-
right, and as
Same
Diane
time.
just pointed out, the calendar invite says 5:30.
Yeah, he's gonna, Neil
right,
said he's
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
redo what might include Karen and.
Yeah.
as well.
Thanks.
So. My next item is to time check, it's 6:59. Next is consideration of planning for the second open house. We're gonna just move
So-
that to next.
We're gonna have that on every agenda, so there's a lot of great ideas that came right before the first open house, and what we're hoping is to get ideas for how to improve
That's the,
raccoon.
I don't know, that's something.
The town mascot.
The town mascot.
So ways to improve the second open house from the first one, and part of that, I think, is like the discussion of when to start pushing out the drafts.
Mhm.
So if we can get comments and, that thought process going for each meeting and just share that with me and Angelina, that'll help. So it's
Is
just
there an online form for us to throw ideas in, or is it always during this
You-
meeting?
throwing together with that whole.
Yeah,
on that
if you
different
want, within that, maybe the share folder we have, I can just have like a public engagement document, and then people can add their ideas if they have resources or dates they want to consider. That
Just
kind
have
of
a
just be
feeling
like
that-
an online template everyone can
I have a
access.
feeling this agenda item, if it's always at the end, it's gonna be at exactly 6:59.
Yeah, so I'll put that in that general folder, just have it loose and people can access and
Yeah.
make comments.
I think it's more, I want to keep putting the plugins, please keep thinking of how to make it
Yeah.
improve.
No, I think that's really important.
And we talked about doing it at Rackers
Right.
Yes,
to get it more down in that area.
Right. I think it's important
Spread it out.
to show that, we're trying to.
Yeah.
Spread out through the whole. Did you hear from them? Can we do it?
I have not, so if anyone has contacts, I'll reach out to them again, but if anyone has a direct contact. Somehow, I think Caitlin mentioned she might know someone.
I just,
But my contact is still there. I'm not sure she's still.
I just
down
used
there.
to go to the office, and there's a person sitting at the desk in the front,
Welcome.
ask them, that worked before, when I've used that for meetings. But I don't know if they still do it the same way, but you got her, she talked to you, or. I drive by there a lot, I could go ask if you want, I mean, not quite by, but.
We had the
Fine.
special election there 2 years ago, so
Okay.
there's gotta be. Between. Yeah, we'll get a copy.
The space is large enough that
Yes,
Oh, it's a great
yes,
space,
so
it's
they
really,
got
like-
Terrace Street.
they have different choices,
Watched lots of shows there.
yeah, they have different choices of spaces. The biggest
Are
one
you gonna
is really
stop?
big.
Did you want to stop?
Oh, no, if you guys have already a contact. go.
Okay.
If you want someone to stop by, I drive a lot, so I could do it, but you should check your contact first.
Okay. Anything else under next steps that we need to?
just to confirm, we are meeting at 5 on June 4th.
And maybe you can come back with we're supposed to be tracking our hours.
Oh, tracking hours, we do not need that for DEC, that's the latest direction we've had, but it's still, if you want to give me information. It's still helpful for us just to know how much time this process takes as a whole, not just for staff, but for committee members and everyone else involved. So it's good metric data.
So you want timesheets when we sit and review and make comments and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine, just could be said because I didn't
I
know
need
that at all.
reminders.
I-
can't do it. I
There
haven't
was a
tracked mine
spreadsheet at
since
one point
last
last
year.
I have my timesheets from 2023.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Or you can just send me an email, just say I spent 2 hours this month.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, if you wanted us to go back, I agreed with what Anne made the comment, maybe we could get a little summary of like when the meetings were, and how long.
Yes.
Who was
So
at
when
them,
did we
so that
meet?
you know, okay, I
Yeah.
was at that one, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
But we do not need it for the grant.
Okay.
Right, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.